Albrecht Dürer's 1511 engraving of the Crucifixion is a visually powerful and conceptually innovative depiction of the central moment of Christ's Passion. Dürer's many prints and paintings of the Crucifixion evidence his creative exploration of how the devotional narrative image can make the viewer a witness to the events of Good Friday. In this series, it has been proposed that Dürer reinvented how the Passion of Christ could be visualized, but we have not considered how Dürer's visual language and aesthetic strategies evolved. To see this development more clearly, we should examine how that creative process was evidenced in his treatment of a particular single motif. Since Dürer so often returned to depictions of the Crucifixion, no subject is better suited to showing how his method matured. To keep within the parameters of this series, this video will compare Dürer's prints of the Crucifixion from his large Passion, small Passion, and engraved Passion. Dürer's 1498 Crucifixion from the large Passion visualizes Christ's death as a narrative subject. While making adaptations, he follows a model already established by Northern Renaissance artists such as Martin Schongauer. Here the image principally focuses on the sacred narrative. In Dürer's woodcut, Christ's muscular body hangs heroically on the cross. Notice how perfectly straight his body stretches along the cross. Despite the fact that blood pours from his hands, feet, and side, his body shows no other signs of torture or suffering. The scene is witnessed by 6 figures and 3 angels. Each of them responds to the moment in a different way. By situating her in the lower left corner, the composition emphasizes the figure of the Virgin Mary. Collapsing in grief, she invites our sympathy. This triumphant event is set within an expansive landscape. Despite the fact that the landscape is Northern European, this image depicts the Crucifixion as a historical narrative. The biblical subject is presented, without any acknowledgement of contradiction, as a historical event happening in the artist's own cultural and geographic setting. Dürer's use of pictorial narrative space was very advanced for 15th century Northern European printmaking. However, his image has so many details, each of them requiring the viewer's attention and interpretation, that the viewer may become distracted. To spiritually focus the viewer, Dürer elevated Christ high above the other figures. The potential danger here is that if Christ seems to occupy his own space within the image, he may become visually disconnected from the narrative and spiritually distant from the viewer. To address that issue, Dürer employs the lines and forms of his print to connect the figures in the foreground with Christ. For example, there's a tree that grows behind John. As a form within the composition, this tree is a visual bridge between John, the angel, and Christ. Dürer's Crucifixion from the large Passion evidences how he had absorbed the artistic models of both narrative action and pictorial space. In this work, he combines these strategies into a composition that depicts a complex heroic and historical narrative. In the Crucifixion from his small Passion from around 1509, Dürer radically rethought his approach to visualizing the subject. Compared with the print from the large Passion, this image has almost no historical context or discernible pictorial space. The crowd of figures all stand close to the foreground, as if they were in the viewer's time and place. This sense of visual immediacy heightens the sacred drama's emotional impact. Within the tight format of this intimate print, there is a visual overlapping and compacting of forms. From the viewer's point of view, one form that is spatially in front of or behind another may appear to be touching, even if they are not. Notice, for example, how John, who stands in the background, appears to be touching both Christ and the Virgin Mary. In fact, he is a visual bridge between them. This may recall John's own account of the crucifixion in his Gospel, where Christ commands John to take the Virgin as his own mother. In this print from the Small Passion, Dürer placed a greater emphasis on the emotional experience of the figures rather than their physical actions. This revised compositional structure is less narrative-oriented and more focused on the image's devotional function. This work establishes a more direct connection between the viewer and Christ, a relationship that is not mediated by the depiction of a historical event. Dürer elicits the viewer's own emotional response to the visual image. In the Crucifixion from the Engraved Passion, the change in medium, from woodcut to engraving, may have inspired Dürer to take yet another approach to visualizing his subject. The shift, already introduced in the Crucifixion from the Small Passion, towards a more intimate, devotional image, is further advanced here. Compared with Dürer's two previous crucifixions, this work is more emotionally restrained. For example, in the Large Passion, Mary collapses under the weight of her own grief. In the Engraved Passion, Mary stands stoically at the cross. Her response to Christ's death is adoration, not anguish. Rather than calling attention to herself, Mary urges the viewer to follow her example of worshiping Christ. The engraving process allowed Dürer to develop a rich tonal quality. His Engraved Passion more strategically employed the inherent relationship between light and darkness of the print medium. The image becomes a contrast between the paper and the ink. There was no printmaker before Rembrandt van Rijn who surpassed Dürer in the use of light and darkness to visualize the crucifixion as a spiritual battle between evil and grace. In this print, Dürer employs the composition itself to connect Christ with John and the Virgin. As he hangs on the cross, Christ's arms form a downward pointing V. As they stand on either side of the cross, Mary and John form an upward pointing V. In Dürer's composition, Christ's body becomes the convergence point of downward and upward pointing arrows. Dürer's print visualizes this moment as a spiritual meeting of heaven and earth. Dürer was responsible for a significant transformation of the 15th century devotional narrative image. However, these innovations in visual strategy did not occur in a single moment of artistic brilliance. These were hard-won victories in a creative process that unfolded over time and in many cases through multiple depictions of the same subject. This comparison of Dürer's prints of the crucifixion is not a suggestion that any one of these images is necessarily better than the others. Innovation does not imply improvement. In each of these prints, Dürer seems to have had a certain objective considered within his purpose for that Passion series. In the Large Passion, he depicted the crucifixion as a historical narrative. In the Small Passion, he focused the viewer on the emotional drama of the moment. In the Engraved Passion, Dürer visualized a spiritual contest. One thing that we can observe from this comparison is that the meaning of the work of art is not only found in the subject. By reinventing his visual strategy, his approach to narrative drama, compositional structure, pictorial space, vocabulary of line, Dürer explored the flexibility of meaning that he could develop from one subject. In each of these devotional narrative prints, Albrecht Dürer brought the purpose of Christ's crucifixion closer to the viewer.